Hello. Hi, everyone.
How's it going?
Yeah, not too bad. Just going to let the room fill up a bit, let those participants join. Right. So, as I mentioned on yesterday's session, I'm going to kick off this session about kind of like the concept of scaling. That's the direction that I'll take it in. And then if we've got time afterwards, we'll drift into like a Q&A, probably mainly based on that. But we'll see how we do in terms of the content and the time, and see what kind of everybody's understanding of it is by the end of it. So I feel like scaling is such a big topic when it comes to Facebook ads. But I feel like a lot of people potentially don't even like know the term, or they're not familiar with the term. So scaling is the process that you go into when you've got ads that are winning, typically. And what you'll do is you will start to increase your budget beyond the initial level that it was set at, and you'll start trying to reach more and more people. So, kind of jumping into this session on scaling, the idea is that we can start to get more people into the funnel and start to grow our business that way. So I feel like a really solid place to start would be discussing when you should scale. And typically, we like to scale when we've got ads that are working. I know that certain brands that are perhaps more, they're brands that are like startups, but with a lot of revenue. So maybe they had a Kickstarter campaign, sorry, a lot of like ad spend ready. So a lot of Kickstarter campaigns and stuff like that, like crowdfunded, or maybe they've got investors behind them. Sometimes those brands will start to scale really aggressively before they are even approaching profitability. So what we like to do is typically play it a little bit more conservative than that, and we like to almost get that like testing down for that proof of concept, and also just protecting their like a business's efficiency as much as we can. So when we scale, it's always at the point where we are profitable, and that we know that we have that kind of like little bit extra buffer, so that we know that we can afford to increase budgets. Because what happens when you scale, and this is something that I think a lot of business owners get perhaps caught out by, is that when we scale, our ROAS is inevitably going to come down at some point. So that's our return on our ad spend. The that's expressed as a multiplier return on ad spend. So like $1 into $5, that's 5x. So that multiplier starts to come down more and more as you scale, and that is 100% natural. In fact, we've had clients come to us and they've said like, "Oh, we're actually, we're looking for an agency." Because whenever we try and scale, our ROAS comes down, and it's kind of on it's our job to kind of educate them that when you do scale to a certain point and spend reaches a certain level, ROAS is going to come down, and what the difference between like a good or an average media buyer, or a good or average media buying strategy and a great one, is that you want to prepare yourself for scale by having content, so your ads, and you want a structure as well, that can be scaled without you suffering the penalties of that ROAS potentially drifting into unprofitable territory. And so what I'm kind of getting at there is that it's more important to ensure that your your creatives and your ad strategy operates well at scale in terms of having a system where you can identify winners through your testing, where you could push those winners with kind of more budget, and that's kind of like an ongoing process, so that whenever you're creating more ads and that you are pushing with a significant amount of budget, when those start to tail off, you need to have a system where you can get another one in, and really keep that content as fresh as possible. Because when it comes to scale, like I say, that ROAS will come down, and it's really important to ensure that when you are scaling, you have that little bit extra buffer. And sometimes that extra buffer is because you are finding these new ads, and you're getting those in, and you're running ads that are kind of you're in a position where you can rotate underperformers out and you can rotate in new promising ads. So scaling is it can be quite a delicate process, because it can be quite a challenge to increase your budgets and be spending so much money per day or per month, when you are kind of operating on a thinner margin, because that ROAS is smaller. So when we're talking about scale, some people will be against it. I've known a lot of businesses that maybe they either don't have the capacity, certainly smaller businesses are some of the ones that would fall into this category. I've also worked with, they were a high-end fashion company where this woman kind of made the clothes by hand, and she would not be able to carry on her business at scale. So some companies, it's not right for them, and I think it would be like remiss of me to not mention that. But some clients outright would say, well, what is the benefit if we know that we're going to make less per order? And the idea behind scale is that when you're optimizing for a higher ROAS, you're going to get results that are perhaps, in your like 4+ ROAS range. And when you're optimizing for ROAS, you are essentially trying to get as much efficiency out of the spend that you're putting in as possible, in terms of getting the best cost per purchase and the best ROAS on the other side of that. With scale, it's a bit of a different strategy, because you're not necessarily primarily thinking about needing to hit an inflated ROAS. What you're actually trying to do instead is you're trying to build a customer base. And the idea behind scale is that even if it's like some businesses will scale even if it's unprofitable. Probably wouldn't be my recommendation for 99% of cases. But what I would say is that these businesses, a lot of the times, in the 99% where they aren't willing to scale at a negative ROAS, what they'll be doing is they'll be increasing their budgets whenever anything's profitable. And what that makes possible is you to start expanding your audience, your customer base, and you start reaching more people, which then that translates to word of mouth. And you end up kind of building this snowball of being able to get more and more interest, more and more customers. And even if they aren't immediately profitable on the front end, or immediately as profitable as a 5x on the front end, the benefits come when you start to look at the numbers further down the line, as people start to purchase again. And maybe you don't need to use a Facebook ad this time. Maybe you don't even need to use a Google ad. maybe it's just emails, maybe it's organic, and they just organically come back, and you start to get more and more value because your customer base is bigger. And as your customer base is bigger, the lifetime value sort of helps everything come together. And so it's more effective for some businesses to be operating on, let's say, 100K a month of spend. They're spending 100K a month, and then they're maybe on a 2x, which let's assume that's profitable for them. Being on 100K at a 2x and returning 200K, but getting those customers in is better for certain businesses than maybe spending 5K a month on a 5x return or even a 10x return. Because even though you've got that really high efficiency for the spend that you're on, you're actually not growing at the rate that a lot of businesses will want to grow at. So that's the idea behind why you would scale. The actual mechanics of how it works is relatively simple. If you think that the Facebook ads platform serves ads to people, and let's use the example of e-com. So you're optimized for purchase, but this could very easily be translated to leads as well. But when you ask Facebook to optimize for purchase, what it's going to do is it's going to look at the audience, and by the audience, you could be running broad, you could be running interests, you could be running any kind of audience. And what it's going to do is it's going to try and find the most committed people, the most interested people right at the start, which is potentially why you'll have seen campaigns come out of the gates flying. And you'll think, oh, this is a really promising campaign. And then it does start to slow down. That is the reason, because Facebook's trying to find those most interested people first. So when it comes to scaling, what you're doing is you gradually go from those most interested people, you start to reach more and more people. The reason I'm making that shape is because the most interested people are right at the bottom. That's where the fewest people are. And as you go to less and less interested people, you are actually reaching more people, of course, because maybe these people aren't familiar with your brand or haven't engaged socially as we start to expand out the funnel. And that is something that you need to be aware of when it comes to your strategy. So when it comes to scaling, that's essentially what's happening. You're increasing the budget, and the goal is to try and reach more and more people. And it's not necessarily to get the maximum efficiency out of each individual person. It's just about getting the people in, building the customer base, building the business, and really starting to get that foundation customer base in there. So that's where the benefits start to really show, and that's the mechanics of scaling. So there are a couple of different ways you can scale, and I'm going to go into those. And I think a really useful thing as well that I'm going to touch on is a couple of things to be aware of if you are going to scale, and I'll cover that afterwards. So when we talk about how to scale, there are essentially two options, and each of those has kind of got a big upside to it. And I would recommend that you can be quite fluid with this. And what I mean by that is maybe you're doing excellent in November because it's Black Friday and you're scaling more than you've scaled ever before. Don't be afraid to bring that back maybe in January when you're a little bit quieter and you're not seeing the same performance. When you're scaling, you have to be more fluid with the budget, and you have to be aware that maybe you'll have great months, but it's not just a roller coaster that only goes up. You need to be aware that you're going to have to roll with the punches, and be ready to scale back and scale up as and when you see the data telling you to do so. So the two ways you can scale are called vertical scaling or horizontal scaling. So vertical scaling is I want you to see it in your mind's eye, as it were, as almost like vertical scaling is building a skyscraper with your budget. It's taken your budget, which was 100 a day, and now we're increasing it to 125 a day. Now we're increasing it to 150. Now we're increasing it to 200. It's just going with that one campaign straight up. Very, very simple. In terms of concept, you're just taking the campaign budget and you're increasing it. In terms of how we do things, and how we've kind of been recommended with Facebook, like from Facebook over the years, as well as our personal experience, we like to scale 20% a week when we're in a phase of scaling. So we'll be constantly liaising with the client and saying, I think we're maybe in a position to scale now, based on the purchases and the purchase data that we're getting, and the position that the business is in. And then what we'll do is we'll suggest that they scale, and when we've got the green light, we'll increase those budgets 20% per week, and we'd like to do that every Monday. The reasoning for that is that when in discussions with Facebook that we've had as an agency, we find that tends to be a trend with what Facebook respond with, and it's usually to do with like, or the algorithm has some sort of kind of reset on a Monday, and that kind of makes sense if you're looking at it from like a calendar perspective, I guess. But that's where we see the most stable way to do it, because we don't want to just be jacking up the budgets a huge amount every week, and kind of shocking the algorithm. Because what can happen if you increase the budget by too much is ads may start to either go into learning limited they've done before, or like go back into the learning phase, as it were. Or what you might also end up with is a situation where the ads just have too much to spend. Because back to the idea of the funnel, you're saying when you're scaling, please find me more people that might be interested in my brand. But if you do that in small enough increments, it can steadily climb its way up this ladder, and understand like, oh, well, maybe people at the bottom of the funnel would be similar to these people, and maybe people in this area would be similar to these people, and then to these people, and then to these people. And if you do that gradual enough, it doesn't shock the algorithm, it doesn't shock the ad sets or the ads, and you can actually rely on some sort of stability as you scale there. What is a danger is if you just jack up the budget like by 10 times, 5 times. That to me is a little bit reckless and potentially, in my opinion, just too aggressive. What you'll want to be doing is just paying attention to what the data is showing you. And you can't do that if you're saying, well, we were spending 100 a day on this campaign before, and now we're spending 1,000 a day on it all of a sudden, and we've seen the efficiency drop off a cliff. That's not what we want at all. In terms of Michelle's question, she's asked me, based on what Facebook has said, if I was to make any changes, would I only do it on a Monday? I don't think that you need to take it like that far, like any changes, because at the end of the day, a lot of the changes, and there are lists of these that Meta provide, a lot of the changes will either send something back into learning, or it won't, regardless of the day. So if you were to scale basically any campaign by 20%, you could theoretically do that on any day of the week, and that's not going to change the it's not going to revert the campaign back into learning limited or learning. And you whereas if you make any changes to the ad level, regardless of the day of the week, that is going to make a that is going to make a difference. Hugo has asked the 20% increase that I speak about. What is that calculated on? Which is what is the target made off to base the scaling on? So, in terms of the 20% increase, that just refers to the budget, what the budget's currently at, and then you increase that by 20%. And so, when you have 20% of an increase, so maybe you've got a budget of $100 a day currently, you'd increase that by 20%. So then that would be $120. And then the next time you go to scale it, if you're in a position where you're profitable still, you can increase the budget then. There's also the question on what's it calculated off. What we like to do is we like to look at the break-even numbers, and we like to look at the position that the business is in. Is the position even is the business even in the position to spend that money at this point? And so you start to look at that as well. And then if you're spending your budget now and you are a very comfortable ROAS, and that could suggest to you that it might be time to start branching out. We also look at MER, which is your marketing efficiency rating. You might know it as marketing efficiency ratio. It's all the same calculations. But the idea of that with your MER, that is in terms of how much you're making in terms of revenue, how much you're spending on ads. And sometimes we'll liaise with clients to try and nail down a figure that they're happy with. A lot of, like I said earlier, the Kickstarter brands or brands that have a lot of investment behind them, they will be happier to spend, if they're making 100K a month, they might be happier to spend a larger proportion of that than perhaps a brand that is already established and wants stability more than kind of like a dynamite-like explosion of scale. Jason, you have your hand up. We'll just cover these questions just to make sure that everybody has kind of got the level of understanding that we want before we move forward. So Jason, if you want to ask your question.
Hey, Guy, good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Well, good afternoon, I guess, for you guys. Have you guys had any experience working with attribution apps like Cometly or like Segmetrics or any of those types of like platforms that I guess the mechanics behind it is like they take data and they feed it back to the conversions API on Facebook or Google to give it more accurate numbering or more accurate data so that you can scale better? Have you heard of that kind of stuff? Have you used it before?
We have worked with that kind of stuff, but that does come with a caveat that is not technically how they work. What they do is that they use a different attribution system to Facebook, and you're quite right that it can really help you understand data, whether it gets it from the conversions API, UTMs, pixel tracking, maybe there's some email tracking involved as well, especially in the case of stuff like Hyros. But when we work with them, it's really important that you're aware that none of that data can get passed back to Facebook, because when you use those, the actual reality is you're getting a different perspective of attribution. You're looking at your results through a different attribution window, a different lens. That data cannot be passed back to Facebook. Otherwise, it would be breaching the iOS 14 policies that Facebook kind of supports all its on all of its partners. So you just got to be aware of when stuff like Hyros. I know that it's a very good platform. I've used it multiple times for a lot of different clients. But I know that the owner of that software is a little bit cagey on how he presents that information. He's always talking about, yes, you can increase the money that you're making with better visibility on the attribution, but it doesn't pass that data back. So the idea behind these, like in terms of broad strokes, in our experience, is that they are really useful for optimization for the media buyer and for the client. They aren't useful for optimization for the actual Facebook ads algorithm because it can't see that data because it's protected for privacy reasons.
Yeah. Okay. I get that. I was thinking about that. I was like, there's no way Facebook is going to open that up to anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess if that's the case, then is there a platform that you recommend using? And if like, does it work? Like, if
That's
we're looking to
a
scale our
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a really high level question to be talking about third party attribution tools, kind of like this early on, in kind of like I guess my sessions with you guys, but yeah, it's a great question. There are certain ones that I would say that I would steer towards. What I would do primarily as step zero or step one, whatever you want to call it, is start using Google Analytics and understand like how much you're looking at it, or how much it is being looked at in the media buying process. Because Google Analytics is free and you can get some great analytics from there. If you find that you're really gleaning quite a lot of useful data on that, maybe it is time to jump in and buy one for you, buy a subscription for yourself. The thing is these don't come cheap, and when you actually consider it, it's not necessarily because it's not feeding that data back. What that can result in is clients being hesitant to spend money on it because it's just looking at results with perhaps more clarity, perhaps more accuracy, but it's a tool for the media buyer, not really for Facebook itself. The ones I would recommend is if you are in a business where you're collecting emails quite early on in the process, such as leads. Hyros is brilliant for that. It's a really great platform, and it does come with an extension that can fit in the ads manager, which can give you some great clarity. I really like Hyros, very good. Can be quite pricey, but I know that like I've seen it work, and I've seen it have different data to what's inside the ads platform that has been invaluable while scaling, which is great, tying it back to increasing your budgets. If you're more on the e-com side of things, you might see success with Hyros, but you might want to try Triple Whale. Triple Whale's very good. They've also got a good I don't know what you would call it, maybe like a support / onboarding team that are usually quite willing to give you a demo and sometimes a discount if you're signing up with them. It's a great platform again. I know a lot of people really like to look at Triple Whale, but again, it comes down to whether you want to use that data over what's being used in Facebook as Facebook begins to improve again after iOS 14 kind of massacred the accuracy of the results. So those are three: Google Analytics, Triple Whale, and Hyros. And then Northbeam is another one. I will throw an immediate caveat on Northbeam and say that it is beyond expensive. I've heard of people getting quotes for, I think it was maybe it was 240,000 a year for that. Now, this was somebody who was spending a lot of money, and it was a big business, but the quote was astronomical, and I've heard of people getting charged an arm and a leg for it. But it's very good because Northbeam tries to create a bespoke attribution kind of process window setting, whatever you want to call it. It tries to create a bespoke attribution setting for your business. So if that seems like something that would apply to you more than the others, then that might be what you need to consider. Again, though, think about, and this is why I recommend starting on Google Analytics, think about whether you're actually using it enough for it to be worthwhile. If you are in a position where you're about to scale, especially aggressively, that sort of attribution tool can be really quite helpful. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks, Kai. That's useful information. Yeah, I never really looked at Google Analytics as another way to analyze the data. I mean, I know you can, but I didn't realize these platforms were just basically interpreting the same data but in their own words. And so that's what it sounds like you're saying.
Yeah, it's you are right. It's something similar to that. Bear in mind, if you're going to use Google Analytics, you'll have to put URL parameters in at the ad level, which is right at the bottom of the ad level on Facebook ads. Zoe says, I'm scaling to a deadline, selling competition tickets with a hard deadline of 30th of November and need to vertically scale ASAP on the best performing ad sets. Any tips doing this faster than 20% twice per week? I would say that this is a great question, and it's one that I get often. And that is, I want to scale more aggressively. How do I do that? So if you don't want to do it just on the Monday, as Zoe has kind of referenced there, you might want to do it on the Monday and the Thursday just to give yourself some time, and do it twice a week. 20% tends to be our conservative approach because we know that's what works, and we know that that is in a vacuum a situation that we would like to do. However, you're not always in that position, and you're clearly not in that position here if you've got a deadline coming up. I would be looking at the end desire of spend, like the end desired spend, and then reverse engineering it to like how much you would need to scale by from the position that you're in now. And so work backwards from there, and understand, like, if I need to spend this amount before November 30th, I've got this much left to spend. How do I spend that, scaling upwards as much as possible? There are other ways to scale, and I will cover that as we progress. But I believe there was another question, although your hand has now gone down, Michael.
Can I ask a quick question? I've heard that some people do small increments every day. You had any experience with that working?
I think Ben even did a video on that a while back, maybe a month or two ago. And he essentially was setting rules, and the rules would kind of tinker the budget up and down as and when you saw that performance. That can be really good, and it can be a great way of maximizing efficiency for your budget. But I would say there's a difference between doing that and like a full-blown scaling approach, where maybe somebody says to you, like if a client says to me, like, oh, we've spent maybe $100,000 last month. Can we start looking in Q4 to start scaling up to spending an average of 130,000 a month? And it's about trying to identify how that works best with your client. I would say that then you're going to struggle with your smaller increments. So smaller increments are great for kind of a slower burn, and maybe almost building the floor up, so that you're spending more as a baseline. As for actually like big lumps of scale that some businesses need or want, they're not perhaps like the go-to with that, but they are a great strategy. Michael, your hand's up.
Yeah, hi, how are you?
I'm really good, thanks. Yourself?
I'm doing well, thanks. So tell me something. When you were talking about, say, Facebook finding the most committed first at the bottom of, let's say, an inverted triangle, so to speak, and then going up, that runs to the specific angle that you're actually emphasizing at that juncture. Is that right?
So that's a very, very good question, and it kind of leads me on to a point that I was going to make, kind of after I'd covered horizontal scaling, but it makes sense to bring it up now. When you scale, you're going to be reaching, like I say, spending anything on Facebook, you start by reaching the people that are most interested. As you start to scale, you need to start to think about how different angles reach different people. And this is kind of what one of my points was in the creative strategy sessions that we did last week, the week before, etc., is that different angles and different types of ads like single image video and carousels will reach different people. So it's really important to have a good amount of creative and angle differentiation as you expand outside of the inverted triangle and get further and further up, because maybe as you certainly get higher and higher in this, and this is a position I've been in, where when I've been scaling, you start to realize we've reached everyone, and we're kind of nurturing a funnel of everyone in this area that might be very interested in this product. So what we need to do now is start introducing angles that speak to the people who are maybe not quite as aware of the problem, or maybe they're not quite as far down the funnel. So you start to have to reach out to people in a way that is, I don't want to say like vaguer, but broader. You need to start understanding the desire behind the angle and start thinking about the emotion behind why they would buy, the kind of the almost like the voice in their head of what is behind getting, or what would be behind getting people to purchase. For you on a Safari, in a Safari niche, this won't be the best example because it's off the top of my head, but it's almost like having right at the bottom of the funnel, you've got stuff like discounts and stuff like that, or like maybe reviews where people are looking around for like that kind of service, or that kind of experience. Whereas as you start to branch out, maybe your ads start to look a little bit more like the hook is like, I never knew going on a safari would be like this life-changing experience. And do you see how we've moved away from people who are like engaging with review content to all the way to, I never knew that this could mean something to me. And that's the kind of approach that you have to take as you scale. It's not just about budgets. Creatives becomes hugely important in that scaling process, because you need to make sure that as you reach more people, you've got ads that people don't get sick of seeing, and that means having a good differentiation of ads. And B, that you can reach more people, because what's going to happen if you don't do that is that you are going to start to, if all your angles are the same, what's going to happen is you're just going to reach the same people, because Facebook's going to be like, well, these people are interested in this, like this angle, so I'm just going to try and keep hitting those people with that same angle, and that might not be the best plan for your growth long term. So that would be how I would approach that, and I hope that covers like a majority of the points.
Yeah, I think the reason I thought of it also is because in a case like Zoe, where she actually has to go and move a certain number of tickets, right, within a certain period of time, would an alternative strategy be basically having a parallel campaigns that address entirely different angles, so to speak, or needs, and thus be a way to effectively increase the budget without disruptively increasing where she started. But I was just curious.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times when you're increasing the budget, you need to be almost increasing the way you approach angles as well. Otherwise,
but would that be resident within one campaign, which would be subject to like a certain percentage increase, or would she actually run two distinct campaigns, so to speak? that basically go after different people with different angles, and thus be able to spin more since she's in a rush.
That's something definitely to consider. I would say the way I'd approach it is still have your angle testing campaign, be testing those, and then promote those winners into the campaign that you are scaling, and see if they can, not if they can spend, because that probably won't be the important part. It's whether when they do spend, you're actually profitable and the cost per purchase is in the area that you need, because that's what scaling's kind of, that's what it's about. You know what I mean? That every ad that is in there is bringing some value, you know what I mean? And that, if that's in the form of like one purchase but it's profitable, that's great differentiation. There was another moment from Robert in the chat where he says, now that I mention it, those UTM tags on Facebook ads, what's the best way to view those in Google Analytics, unless that is beyond the scope of our call today? I suppose it's a touch out of the scope, which is fine. But in terms of GA4, you're going to want to find where you can look at the campaign source, the medium, and the like term reports. That should be in the reports area, but I know what you mean. GA4 is a little bit of a different beast to Universal Analytics, and perhaps not an altogether better one, but I can definitely provide some like a link to help with that. In terms of doing a future session on GA4, that's absolutely no problem. Hugo, your hand is up.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, man. So just a quick question on the scaling as well. So it has to do with the 20% that you posted. So we started, and we have a cost per result target, and that's say 300 Rand per campaign. So just use the number 300. So what we used to do is we used to scale once a week, and we just ended, so keeping the 20% as a scale in mind per campaign, that is what I based it on. I found that in one of Ben's videos before I signed up for this mentorship. So using that, we did once a week, and we just found that the results, we never really found a spot that was consistent. You know, the 1 week it's up, the next week it's down, like it, and it was so radical that it made absolutely no sense to do it once a week. So I commented on one of Ben's videos, and he said, okay, well, because I suggested doing it twice a week, you know, and that turned out to be a lot more beneficial for us. So is that the correct strategy? Sorry, the correct strategy to apply? I've seen more consistent results, but when we get close to a cost per results that reaches our target, like, we can still scale up or down, but it's going to be less than 20, you know. And I just want to, am I like fine tuning it to a positive side, or am I messing too much with a scale that really has no significance if the increase is very low?
I actually really like the idea that you put across there. You've started on once a week, and then you've changed to twice a week, and it's working better for you. I think that works, and with some businesses as well. Certainly, like I've worked on some in the past where, because you're getting so much data and so much like high quality data, it doesn't make sense to only do it once a week, because the account can handle it. I had an account in springtime that wanted to move from 72,000 a month to 100,000 a month, and their business was just in a position where that could very easily happen. And we started doing that based on the time frame that we had and previous scaling sessions that we'd done. We moved from that to, we didn't even do once a week because we'd already done that previously, and it had worked, but given the actual context of the situation, we just went twice a week. So I think I wouldn't, like, you have to be fluid with the budgets. Don't be in there every day, like maybe like nudging it back and forwards if that's the if you're using larger and larger increments, or like spending larger and larger amounts. I would just be like, up that spend, look at the data coming in, and if it tells you to up it again, you can. If it tells you that maybe stay where you are, stay where you are. And if it tells you to move backwards, then you can do that. When you are scaling, like I kind of prefaced this session with, there is that expectation that you will need to be more fluid with it. And then, like as a kind of side note, I know I've touched on it as well previously, but it's important that when you are scaling, have those different angles ready to go, so that when you're showing these people in the audience, the ads, you can start to understand why people might convert on certain angles, and that way you can start developing like your ads approach for multiple groups of people, rather than just thinking that everyone is perhaps going to be interested in the same one.
All right, thanks so much, man. That's useful. Thank you.
No worries at all. While we've got like a temporary kind of lull in the questions, I'll move into the other form of scaling that you can do, which is called horizontal scaling. So if vertical scaling is like building a skyscraper because you're building it one campaign all the way up, horizontal scaling is almost like building lots of houses next to each other. And this is I would say that it's not a one or the other approach. Sometimes you will need to vertically scale, sometimes you'll need to horizontally scale, and sometimes you'll need to do both. If everything's going great, like why wouldn't you? So that's something that I'd just like to preface this part with. But then in terms of horizontal scaling, what that looks like is either adding more campaigns into like more CBO campaigns, or adding in more ABO ad sets. So let's say your angle testing is on ABO. You could if you notice that a lot of your tests are doing better than you perhaps think usually, and you're doing really well from a cost per purchase, ROAS, or cost per result perspective, you might want to think about increasing the budget and testing another angle or two more angles. And because you're using ABO, you're putting in more budget into the account. Both terms of scaling are useful for getting more budget into the account. Let's say you wanted to scale by $100, you could add $100 to your CBO campaigns, or you could add in that $100 into other campaigns. Some ideas for you for the horizontal scaling approach would be, if you are in the e-com space, you could definitely try a catalog, especially with a broad audience. That might work. And so that can be really useful, because remember, when I'm telling you that people convert based on different kinds of ads, and if you're never running a catalog ad, you're never potentially reaching the pocket of people within your audience that respond really well to catalog ads. So it can just unlock another part of your audience. So instead of hitting the same people again, you start to branch out with different formats, different messaging, different creatives, different campaign types. So it can be really useful to consider like building it ready to scale. And so a catalog ad, maybe with a broad audience, that would be a campaign that could be worth your while. That's what is called a DABA, which is dynamic ads broad audience. That's all that means. And certain businesses do really well with those. So definitely want to like have as a string to your bow. There's also, you could be doing, you could experiment with a catalog retargeting. You could test an Advantage Plus shopping campaign. You could even test scaling with that as well. They're very scalable campaigns for the most part. You could test maybe having a different location. So the way I would do it is, I'm quite happy to put stuff like the United States and Canada together, put in Australia in. Maybe I would do that potentially either on its own or with New Zealand or something like that. Or maybe you want to break out into a different language. Maybe you have a new product launch. Maybe you have a sale that you want to run. And that could, like a sale campaign could be one. There are just so many opportunities to increase that with, like I said earlier, additional tests. You could have post-purchases as well, a post-purchase campaign to try and really maximize that lifetime value. And you start to see where I've just suggested about 7 campaigns, and not all of them will apply to you, but some of them will. And what you'll find is that when your business is doing well, perhaps vertically scaling or horizontally scaling, you'll want to introduce the other as well. So let's say you horizontally scale and you notice that you're getting a lot of efficiency there. You could then start to vertically scale as well. And you start to be powerful in the terms of big and wide, which is great. But you won't always be able to do that. You know, you have to be fluid with these things. And maybe let's say one of your campaigns is a flash sale, that can't be on forever, obviously. So you need to think about it in terms of like time of year, or like, how's the business typically doing in November? How's the business typically doing in Q3, that kind of thing. And if you know that you do really well in Q4, for example, what you can do is you can prepare yourself to be growing the account big and wide, so that you can start increasing more budgets across more areas really effectively, instead of just staying where you are, or instead of just doing one or the other. Because I know that with the question we got earlier as well, where it was like, I have to scale to this point, but it might be overstretching what I can do in terms of scaling vertically. You could look to scale horizontally as well. So that would definitely be that's a big lesson that I would like to pass on to you, that you want to be fluid with how much you're scaling, whether that's horizontally or vertically. Almost got mixed up there. Horizontally or vertically. What you want to do is just recognize that maybe you'll be doing better sometimes than others. Jason asks, would you say that generally you use vertically scaling to reach more of the same types of people and horizontal scaling to reach new avatars? I don't know that I would, probably, because with vertical scaling, you can definitely reach like other people. If you think about it as vertically scaling with, let's say, not that I'd suggest you do this, but let's say you vertically scaled with one ad underneath that campaign and ad set, and then you introduced a new ad that was completely different. Under the assumption that both were profitable, you would be reaching different people. So you could reach more different people with vertically scaling. Horizontal scaling, it can help you reach new avatars, like I say, with the dynamic ads broad audience, or maybe Advantage Plus, because it operates on the new Lattice algorithm. I think they're both great ways of reaching more of the same types and different types of people, because at the end of the day, that's what scale is all about. The big thing to avoid with scale is having a high frequency in your top of funnel. That will not be achieving the effect that you want it to do. Because if you said to me, oh, Kai, I'm looking to scale, I want to reach more and more people, I want to grow my customer base, and I want to start getting my name out there. That's what scaling is all about. So if you start focusing maybe on too much of the same ad formats, too much of the same angle, too much of the same anything, too small an audience, perhaps, if you're really pigeonholing yourself into an area like that, what you're actually going to end up doing is not reaching new people, but you're going to be staying down here but spending that money here. And obviously, if you're scaling and your frequency starts to creep up to about 2 or 3, especially when you start to hit 3, that frequency means how often, over the time frame you're looking at, how often the same person is seeing an ad on average. So you're not reaching new people if you're scaling and your frequency is 3 or 4, for example. So just something to be aware of. You really want to make sure that when you're scaling, you're using those different angles to keep that frequency down. And if your frequency starts to drift up, it's probably a sign that maybe your either formats or your angles are actually hitting a lot of the same people or the same types of people over and over again, instead of getting new people involved, which is again that's what you want. You want new people to come in. And I know that a lot of brands really struggle to move. I know it can be quite difficult to move from 4 figures to 5 figures or 5 figures to 6 figures, but a lot of brands really struggle to move from 6 to 7 or 7 to 8, especially because how do you spend that much money and ensure that you're getting customers in like that will result in a profitable year for you? And what you'll find is that things start to get really interesting around those numbers. But that would be probably a more specialized session in itself. We've got another hand up. So would you like to ask your question, Matisse?
Yeah, just a quick question about frequency. We advertise in Europe in really small countries. So, for example, our country have only 2 million people, and now I'm checking the frequency of our ad is 7. Like it's crazy, but still working.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible. We hit frequency 2 or 3 in 1 week with an ad because it's such a small country.
Yeah, so that means that there's more of a limit on your scale. You need to be aware that you won't be able to reach as many people as you could in perhaps the US. And what that means is that your frequency will go higher up. I was working on a client earlier this year on a project that they were doing, this big launch for a brand, and they were in Bosnia. And we very quickly learned that frequency would go up there as well. The good thing is for you is it's working, and that's absolutely brilliant. My thought would be is what happens when that frequency moves from 7 to 8? Do you start to see efficiency go down? Do you start to see ROAS go down? If it does start to go down, maybe you're in a sweet spot. If you start to see frequency go from 7 to 6, do you see better ROAS as a result of that? Basically, what frequency discusses is like how many times someone needs to see an ad. How many times is someone seeing an ad? So the question becomes, how many times do we need to show someone an ad for them to purchase? If that answer for you, for your business, is 7, then you're in a brilliant spot. If it's lower than that, then you can afford to decrease the budgets. But then, of course, you won't be scaling. A thought there would be introduce those new angles, introduce maybe a catalog, different ad formats, and see if you can get a hold of that. And maybe just because, like you're saying, you're trying to get more people purchase. So get those people in with the different formats and angles.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
No worries. And then we've got Zoe's question, which is, when scaling horizontally, is there a maximum number of campaigns I recommend having? That's a brilliant question because it starts to drift into like structures. And of course, you don't want to overcook it, because otherwise, if you're managing the ads, you definitely don't want to be managing many, many, many campaigns. I would say that if you're starting to drift beyond 10, you need to have a look at your account and start thinking about, am I maybe overlapping too many things? Am I trying to split things too many times? Realistically, you shouldn't need that many campaigns in order to scale effectively. But like every business is different, every account's different as well. So you might find that maybe your sweet spot is having a couple more campaigns. You might be happy with a regular evergreen because it's working. So that would be like all your best ads with a couple of your best audiences. Maybe you've got a creative testing that's you're happy with the amount you're testing. Maybe you've got a middle and bottom of funnel. Maybe you've got a post-purchase. Maybe you're introducing a middle and bottom of funnel catalog because you're seeing good conversion rates. Maybe you're introducing a broad catalog as well. And then beyond that, you start to drift into maybe different, more sandbox ideas that you have. So yeah, I'd probably try and keep it towards 10 unless you under 10, unless you've got a really good reason for moving towards that number. But that is all for our time today. We managed to cover everything to do with horizontal and vertical scaling, and a good amount of questions as well. Really pleased with this session and how people have responded to it and came with the questions as well. So thanks very much, and it'll be great to catch you on the next session. Thanks, everyone. Bye.